Let's do some trading with Mr. Tim Bigham, option strategist at Buy Alerts. Tim, what do you think? JPM looking even better than the banks, which look pretty solid on their own.
Yeah, and I think, it's certainly going to be interesting to see post-earnings, what happens with the stock here. I think it'll kind of hang out around this area, given the fact that it's outperformed dramatically, not only, the overall market, but the overall banks here going forward. I think the number will probably be good, not great. You mentioned, NIM will probably come in a little bit here. So the banks also not feeling quite the effect of the high interest rates that many had hoped for, perhaps. So I'm just going out taking advantage of this week's IV, which is obviously, rich to say the least with earnings coming out. So I'm going out selling an iron Condor to the upside, selling the 252.5, 255 call spread, which is right at that all-time high level that it hit not too long ago. And then to the downside, selling the 232.5, 230 put spread, which is basically where the stop gap opened post kind of that Trump bump here. So I look for it to remain somewhat range bound here, bringing in about 85 cents on that trade. So like that risk return, getting over a 50% return on risk here. If the stock basically remains in about a 10-point range post earnings, plus the market makers are implying about a 4% move in the stock, which would pretty much equate to those strike prices as well. So hanging my hat up to the upside and downside that will continue to kind of bleed out sideways on JP Morgan and probably most of the other banks, given the fact that they've kind of shot up a little too aggressively, but they'll probably come out with decent earnings as well.
Okay. This is a pretty range-bound kind of higher probability trade, right? I mean, you're going to have a good chance of keeping your money on this.
Yeah, I think I certainly like the fact that IV is around 50 on this week's compared to
360 is. So she's posting best market she's doing here.
Right.
So, okay.
And being able to kind of structure it.
Yeah, I don't want.
And at that gap opening and at the expected move, I kind of like that as well. I think that'll provide some resistance and support for the trade too. So kind of like it on all fronts. And if the stock happens to, rip past the short strike or below the short strike to the downside, right, I can move that other spread up or down, bring in some more premium, deflect some of the overall potential loss on it. And to begin with, I don't mind, risking, about $1.60 to make 80 cents here. Kind of a 2-to-1 shot that the stock doesn't move more than 10 points post earnings.
Okay. Nice. Pretty, decent amount of volatility in the stock right now, allowing for this type of trade. Investors betting on a pretty swingy response, and you're kind of fading that essentially.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, the fact that the VIX kind of poked up here recently added a little more fuel to the option prices on stocks generally, which helps this trade as well. If the VIX was down around 12 or 13, you'd probably see, the IV on this week's earnings in JP Morgan well under 50. Now it's over 50. So getting a little more premium, a little further out, bigger cushion here, kind of like on all fronts.
All right. Tim, I think it's a pretty good approach for a stock that has gone on a nice run. I would think unlikely to break down big. They're not really, you're not really accustomed to like 5% plus down moves on the banks. Now maybe you could get a big rip. Look at the way like KB Home ripped after earnings, but I don't think that's like a big risk here either because that stock was killed going into the earnings. JPM's been fine, and it's been rallying. So I feel like the range trade makes some sense.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a stock that's been one of the better performers here. So this trade, to kind of allude to what you and Caroline were talking about earlier, I'm cautiously pessimistic to the upside at some point, cautiously optimistic to the down point at some point, and getting paid for that caution, if you will.
All right, nice. I like it. Tim Bigham, Buy Alerts, also like the imagery in the background. In case we forget who's there, it's this guy.
That's
got the finger pointing right at you. I love it.
I'm
Thanks,
him,
Tim.
yeah.
Good stuff. Like the trade. All right. collecting credit for 85 cents, trading JPM in a range, going into earnings. Coming up, let's talk commodities and